I'm Professor Aliza Kaplan. I am a law professor at Lewis and Clark Law School and the director of the Criminal Justice Reform Clinic. For people who don't know, we do all sorts of what I call back-end work. So we work on cases and projects after people have been through the system. We have or had a clemency project, which is mostly what we're going to talk about today. We have a parole project. We have a program where we provide legal services to incarcerated youth throughout OIA, and do a bunch of other stuff on juvenile justice issues. And our newest project is our Senate Bill 819 project. So we're doing a lot of cases under that law. So the reason I wanted to come today, and I want to come to the Lifers meeting in November, is because, as many of you know, our current governor is leaving office in the beginning of January 9th, 2023 is her last day. And over the last 3 years, people have been applying for clemency. And also we now have Senate Bill 819, and basically, and you all are I'm gonna ask you in a little bit, these sort of avenues for early release have created a lot of hope, right? And I remember when Sterling Cuneo was still in, he would say to me, "It's crazy in here. People who never exercised before exercising, people who never took a class or taken all these classes and like all this stuff." And he's like, that's the hope, you know? And over time, I started to feel like anxious that we, the clinic and others, were responsible, and what if it all doesn't work out the way people want? And he kept telling me, and I spoke to him this morning to give me my pep talk. He said to me, you know, it's not ever about like one person or one organization or even any of you individually. It's showing that, you know, everyone has things to strive for no matter what, and that good comes out of hope, and productive things come out of hope. So I've been sort of carrying that around for the last couple of years, and as we're getting closer to the end of the governor's term, I've talked to a few of you about this, but I wanted to come and have a conversation. I want to drop some truths about clemency. I think it's important because I get crazy messages about this is going to happen and then this is going to happen, and most of it's not true. So I want to put out there some real truths about clemency. And I want to have a little bit of a conversation about hope. And with all of this, I want to manage some expectations, if that makes sense. And I don't know, like, if I can really do that, or whether we're just talking and maybe someone will hear something in here that will be useful or helpful to them. I know for the people that the clinic represents on clemency, we have had all the conversations. We have had all the conversations. We have managed expectations. I hope that everyone that we represent knows that we've done everything we can and we're just waiting, and not everyone's going to get it, right? But I also know there's a lot of people who filed for themselves, and maybe they don't get to have those conversations as much. So that's a reason why I wanted to be here. I, care about all of you. I care about the folks throughout DOC and different facilities, and I want everyone to be, I can't control how people feel, but I want people to know that there are people out here that care about what happens, no matter what happens in their clemency cases or in any of their legal proceedings. But first, let me drop some of those truths. Let me just get to that. Let's get that out of the way, then we can have a conversation. All right, I made a list. Okay, I made a list. First of all, let me be really clear. I do not know or speak to the governor about clemency. All right, I have never had a conversation with the governor about her clemency or pretty much anything else. Okay, I don't ask her what her plans are about clemency. The governor, like like in any case, right? She's the judge in my case, all my cases, in the clinic's cases, right? She's the judge in all of your cases. And just like in any other legal proceeding, I would not communicate with the judge outside of the legal proceedings. I also want to be really clear, I'm not a decision maker. And I talk about this with my clients all the time, with the clinic's clients, right? Like, we are not the decision maker. Maybe one day soon, some of these amazing students will graduate and go on to be all of the decision makers, to be the judges, to be on the parole board, to be the governor. That's the plan, right? Some of you, right? So that would be amazing, right? But as of right now, I'm not a decision maker, and none of us in the clinic are decision makers. So anything I'm saying today, these are my opinions, okay? These are just my opinions based on our experience, okay? Since taking office, in 2015, Governor Brown has granted 1,148 sentence commutations. 963 of them were COVID related and had a very specific criteria. 41 commutations were for AICs who fought in the wildfires. They all got a year off their sentence. 144 of those are folks who have committed serious crimes. 72 of them were people who committed crimes as juveniles and were sentenced to more than 15 years. That was the group commutation that there was a whole lawsuit on, and now that's over. She also granted 63 pardons, right, for people who are already out and to clear their records. So I just want to be really clear when I'm talking about the inside prison group or folks that have committed serious crimes. We're talking about 144 people. And I just think it's important that, you know, when we think about the numbers of people who have applied, it seems so incredible because she has let out people who have committed serious crimes because they have done the work, right? But it's also a really small percentage of the prison population, which is close to 12,000, right? And I just want I want the numbers to be clear because I think I get lots of messages and even the reporting is a little bit off, and I checked all of this before I came. Another thing that's really important, 90% of all the governor's non-COVID related commutations and pardons were done pro se. So a lot, meaning the person did them themselves. They did not have an attorney. So I think it's really important that everyone knows that, you know, you don't have to have an attorney on these, and most people who have received clemency did not have an attorney. Will there be more commutations and pardons? My opinion, yes. I believe there will be more. Will all 2,000 of the people who have applied for clemency in the last 2 years receive clemency? Definitely not. No. Okay, it's really important. Do we know how many more people will? No, we have no idea. I don't think her staff has any idea. They're just doing the work, right? we believe that most of the commutations will be granted by mid-December, and then mostly pardons, but till the end. And between now and then, many people are going to get rejected. I know it's already happening, right? They did a big drop last week. There's also, or 2 weeks ago, there's also going to be people who hear from the governor's office and where they're going to say, we didn't have enough time to get through the review. Because even though they increase their staff, they, it's a process, right? What they do in that office for every case. And, having DOC weigh in and the DAs weigh in and the victims weigh in, it's a big process, and there's no way they were trying really hard to get through all the ones for June, but I'm not sure it's going to happen. I'm just being honest. From what I'm hearing. I think the most important thing that I want to say is that whether you get clemency or not it's not about fairness. It's definitely not about justice. It's not about who's the most deserving. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes as a lawyer, you can bring a case in court, and because of, precedent and past law and, how another very similar case turned out, you have some sense of how it should turn out. Obviously, we know it doesn't always work. You guys know that better than anyone. But you have some sense when you know what the law is. Clemency, good or bad, is not like that, right? In clemency, it's completely up to the executive, the governor, and every governor might have a different criteria. They each have different pressures on them about making these decisions. So there's absolutely no way to even make an educated guess. So I just want to be really clear. It's not about what's fair. It's not about who is more deserving than somebody else, right? And it's nothing in our criminal legal system is about justice. And this isn't either. So I'll start on the clemency. If you've already submitted a clemency past June, anytime past June, they will definitely not look at it. But when we have a new governor, that governor may or may not be open to clemency. And if so, what is their criteria? We'll need a little time to figure it out. And then you can always reapply under a new governor. But it's important to be a little bit patient to get a sense from whoever the new governor is, what they are open to in regard to clemency. And we, of course, will be looking for the same thing because we don't know who the governor will be and we don't know what their interest in clemency will be. But you can always apply over and over time. With regard to Senate Bill 819, it is law. It is not changing with any administration. The governors will change and the law will be there no matter what. The only thing that changes is if the district attorney changes, they might have new criteria, or a current district attorney might change criteria over time. That's happened already a little bit because it's so new. So it's important to know the criteria in the district attorney's office, but it will not go anywhere when the administration changes. Outside of individual clemencies, whether people get them or don't get them, I just want everyone to understand sort of the bigger picture, at least, from the clinic's perspective, which is that, Governor Brown has used her clemency power already, right? Never mind what else she might do. Normally, the way that governors and executives should use their clemency power. And clemency was created to be used on a regular basis, right? For rehabilitation, for innocence, for all different things, right? Mercy, forgiveness. And it was used that way throughout history in Oregon and presidents. But that all stopped in the 80s and 90s, right? And when we moved to the more punitive criminal legal system, and we put in all the policies about mass incarceration. And during that time, as a society, there was so much fear that governors didn't want to use their clemency power, right? We moved as a society to a place where we didn't believe people could change, or we didn't believe people could be rehabilitated, or that people deserve second chances, right? And instead, our policies and our society double down, right, on violence, using violence to get rid of violence, basically, and so all of the things you all know well, life imprisonment, tough on crime, mandatory minimums, all of that happened then, and with that, clemency went also. So what's really amazing about what Governor Brown is doing, it's that it's not so amazing, right? It's that she's she's brought back clemency in a way that if I had one great hope out of all of this, outside of the individuals affected, obviously that's real, is that, you know, she has set an example that clemency can and should be used regularly by all executives, no matter the political party, right? And that it will be used for some of the same reasons that she's been using it. And I know that those hopes and the future of clemency doesn't really speak to people's individual situations, but you know, I don't really feel like I'm in a position to speak fully about the hope created and what is it all meant, what does it look like, what are we going to do, what's going to happen when a lot of people get rejected. Robert wrote me an email about the Lifers meeting, and I remember I read it to you. And he gave some ideas of what we wanted to talk about with regard to hope. And when I read it to Mark and a few other folks, I just said, like, Robert should be speaking about this, right? This isn't, yes, this, it's not for me. I'm not in here, right? It's about what are all of you thinking about when we talk about hope, right? Is Sterling right? You know, is the hope that's been created by the possibility of release for people who never thought they could be released early, is that, how do we harness that into good, right? How do we prevent it from breaking everyone's hearts? I mean, I don't know if that's possible, but how do we do it at least in a way where everyone's going to be safe and, you know, a lot of the things that have been happening over the last couple of years don't end? And I don't know, maybe I'm completely off track, but I just feel like all of you are the people that need to answer that.
I came to prison early in my life, got arrested when I was 18. I've been here ever since. And I was told I was going to die in a cell. So there was no hope, really. However, for me personally, I made a change in my life before all this clemency stuff happened. I started to become a different person. The growth that I was starting to see, I was proud of it. My parents, my family, are real proud of it, and I'm happy with the person I've become. But when the clemency came, I was introduced to hope. I thought that there's a shot, there's a real possibility that I'm not gonna die in a cell. And, you know, however that goes, it's, you know, if it goes bad, I'm gonna be crushed. I probably won't come out myself for a couple of days. But I'm happy with the person that I've become in the meanwhile. The things that I've done since the clemency has become a possibility, and the things that I've done before that.
There's gonna be emotions high. So we have to provide as a community spaces for individuals to be able to, I guess you can say, grieve and process that rejection, those emotions, because that's how I felt when I was like, man, I don't even care. And there's so many situations in prison that can feed that I don't care mentality, right? And so we got to create spaces for individuals to even process this sense of rejection, this emotional. And we have to encourage people to take responsibility as far as, don't let this be the reason to deter you from future opportunities, because a lot of the guys that are out right now, they didn't know. They've been crushed, time and time again, and they just stayed fighting for something. They didn't know what it was, but it was self-generated hope of what they believed that they deserved. And I think that's important, because even with my case, like, I have an opportunity now simply because I addressed some of my own issues. Like, look, man, this hurt, this is extremely painful, and I want to give up. I got life without the possibility of parole. I've been here since I was 18. Why try, right? Or am I only going to be this person that society doesn't want in society? But that's just the narrative I told myself, and so I started telling myself a different narrative. So one of the things I want to encourage all of our peers is it's going to be painful off the rip. It's going to be hurtful. But we have to process that pain, and knowing that once we snap back from that and say that, you know what, I'm gonna fight hard, I'm gonna prove, to myself and to the community that, or whoever denied it, because I'm gonna fight harder.
Yeah, just a couple days ago, there was a man that was saying, if they make me do this, then I'm just gonna go to the hole. And my response to him was, look at the climate of what's happening in our state. Look at the clemencies, the Senate bills, look at all of this stuff. And even if this isn't happening for you right now, in a couple of years, something else may come. Don't lose hope. And if you flip out and if you do these things, what happens to your chances? Everything that you've built up to now does what? And he says, goes away. I said, does this make sense to you? And he was like, yes. And that takes me back to Sterling, to Des. We used to talk about the struggle. And we were talking about the criminal justice system. We're talking about being locked up away from family. We're talking about the struggle of trying to be the best you can be, even in terms of confinement. And you find a balance of that somewhere. And when things like this come around and people get hope, and they're saying, hey, I can be hopeful. This that didn't exist before exists now. What's gonna exist in 10 years? What's gonna exist in 15? We don't know, but we're hopeful that'll be better than what we have. We have a good system. It could use some tweaks. It could use some improvements, but we have a good system. What happens if we all just give up on it and do nothing? Then we have the same old thing that, we have the same old stuff that we've always had. And I just think that we have to stay in the struggle, and if we fall, we have to get right back up and just keep on being hopeful and just keep being the best that we can be.
The one thing that I've been hearing for years and years and years is I have nothing to lose. That's like the go-to. I don't care. I have nothing to lose, right? And I used to be one of those guys because it sounded good and it made sense when I was 19, 20 years old and I just didn't care because I didn't know any better. But the way I look at it now is like, it's not so much that you have nothing to lose. You have a lot to gain. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And not only that, I'm not just hoping to see what's going to happen. It's what can I do? What can I contribute to change that, whatever tomorrow looks like? So it's not about having nothing to lose. We have everything to lose, even if you're here for the rest of your life. You can always give back.
He started talking about like how negativity here is the norm, and how like to see somebody working out that's never worked out before, stuff like that can start to create a little bit of change. But one of the thoughts I've been kind of thinking through here is that as a mandatory minimum stake. So there's, for the guys who are doing good or guys who are trying to do good, there's just as many, if not twice as many people who really don't care. They don't have nothing to lose, like he's talking about. And so a lot of these dudes, like I've heard people say, good time, I'm gonna have a good time. Like I'm gonna do everything I can to have a good time, whether it gets me in trouble or not. But for like my perspective, if like I've come to this point in my life where I actually care, different family members of mine have come in and out of here or whatever. And so I feel like clemency to some degree is a little bit, seems unattainable to some guys. It just seems too hard, or like they're not gonna get it. But I've seen a lot of impact as far as people slowing down their role, not trying to create as many problems, or at least trying to sign up for a class, trying to look at it with the 819. It seems like it's giving like a universal blanket of hope that I like to see. I feel like that's making my life easier as a lifer in here, somebody who's growing up here. I can see it where it's like, okay, man, that's cool. Whereas like the Josh Kane or the Sterlings or the Kyle Hedquist guys, even to some degree Pickens, 6 or whatever, he was doing so good that you're like, okay, man, I can see that guy. He's somebody that's real likable and does a lot of good. He's probably gonna get it. But the 819, a lot of people, I think that's kind of creating something cool,
For me, I never learned. I taught myself to not project hope onto things I couldn't control. When I first went to death row, all the skills that got me to death row were inapplicable to getting off of death row and living, a normal life. And that included, I had to learn to read and write, and I had a lot of disadvantages. So I learned to just project hope on what I controlled and to exercise to the best of my ability the skills that I had. And as they grew, I grew. And so I would take satisfaction in not necessarily a decision from the Supreme Court, although I've been really successful before the courts, did I do everything I could to make that brief right? Can I pass that brief on, give it to the court, and sit back and know in my heart that myself, my defense team, did everything we could, you know? And I would just be hopeful in the present moment, right? Knowing that the outcome was out of my control, that you can do everything right and things can still go wrong. So that's kind of just a short personal take on hope and how I exercise it more internally than project it.
I started paying attention to 819 when it was going through. At first I thought that we were basically giving power to the same people that stuck us in here wrongfully.
Are you the one that wrote me that mean letter then? I've got a lot of letters.
It was me. No. So
I got a lot of those letters.
I was feeling kind of conflicted about that. I'm like, the same people that are willing to put you in prison for life for jaywalking are now, you're going to ask them for help, right?
Yep.
So I originally didn't support it, didn't like the idea of it, even though I wanted the hope to be out there, right? And then I kind of started paying attention to the way the pendulum was swinging in society, and we're looking at the abolitionist group, and we're looking at the reform groups, and the way that that's going. And I think anybody that studies law, like most of you have, you see the pendulum swing one way and then the other way, and now it's swinging in our favor, which is really good. So when society is getting on board with the prosecutors in 819, that's when you get something that can actually happen. And now I'm looking at 819 a little bit differently. I see a lot of hope there because we're getting these same people that are going to be coming into these positions as lawyers, as attorney generals, all those positions, right? And so if we can get the movement behind them and see the culture shifting that way, that brings a lot of hope, especially since now it's going to be a law that can continue on and continue to be built upon later on.
Yeah, I think it's also important with 819 to realize that district attorneys change also. So we don't know what's coming, just like so many of you have said. We don't know. But the whole sort of point between 819 is partially, I was very interested in doing it, and the clinic was really interested in sponsoring it because let's have as many avenues as possible, right? I mean, we don't know what the next governor will bring. We don't know who the next parole board will be, but the more options that there are, whether they serve you specifically or not, right? The more options, the better, right? And so that was sort of the purpose behind it. And no, it's not ideal, and there's lots of things I wish that were different, but when you pass a law, you know, you're always doing that. But it's already helped a ton of people. People leaving prison, people already out of prison. And it's, it's been really exciting, and it's really different than clemency, but it's just another avenue. So I think that that's the best way to think about 819. It's the best way to think about, the future. It's the best way, and what you've all said mostly about how hope is like individual to you and like how you live your life. And I mean, that's what it is for everybody, I think, in the world, right? I mean, it's so personal, and it can't be for something else, right? It has to be from in here. And you're all like such amazing examples of that, and it's true. And it's really inspiring to me.
You guys speaking about hope. One thing, when I was speaking to some of the young guys in here, I let them know when I came in, I was 21, and I came in with a life sentence, possibly at 25, or 25 with the possibility of life. But in my mind, I never comprehended the life part of the sentence. Never in my mind was I'm stuck in here until the day I die. In my mind, I'm like, okay, you're going home. Eventually, one day, you're going home. So with that mindset, it was kind of like I have to do whatever I can do to put myself in a good position to become a better man. When they become a dad, I need to use this as like a university and a college and learn everything I can learn, because one day I will be going home. So for me, when you're talking about hope, that comes from within. It's nice to have the opportunity of these 819s and commutations and everything else. That's beautiful and that's wonderful. But that hope for me has to come from within us. And that's something that no one can take away. As long as you have that within you, it doesn't matter if you get rejected and everything else. I was fortunate enough to be found rehabilitated by the government. She granted me commutation, but she granted me commutation to go see the board. And the parole board had a different idea of what to do with me. And I remember during that time, my emotions was everywhere. I was angry, I was upset. I couldn't find no one else to blame, so I had to find some reason to blame myself why I didn't do this right or do that right. But I remember during that time, in the back of my mind, I'm like, you have the opportunity to flip out and go do something stupid. Then the other side of me is kind of like, well, you're just gonna dig in your hole a little bit deeper, so just relax. Find some way to get through this. And that was probably one of the toughest things I went through, but by me doing that, I gave my brain enough time to kind of think of some more options, and I ended up finding another option. But the hardest thing was talking about hope is the hope that we give our families. That, hey, you know, we're gonna be going home, or we might be coming home. I mean, me, my dad, and my wife, we're buying kitchen towels and soap and clothes and bath products and TVs and computers, all types of stuff, right? Because in my mind, like, okay, well, I'm coming home. In their mind, my son and my husband's coming home. When I received that note from the parole board, it was harder for me to accept it, but now I gotta help them accept that as well. So if you have a way that you can kind of help yourself be grounded and help your family be grounded, if you do have to get that no, it's a little more easy to digest.
The thing I would say to my peers and everybody present here is that no one would have predicted any of this happening 3, 4, or 5 years ago. So you never know what lays on the horizon. You never know what the next chance is. And people who capitalized on that, you know, and got out and rode the wave of clemency, are people who've been putting in the work for a long time, not knowing that this might happen, but it did happen.
So much, and thank you everyone for being here today. And we're going to continue this conversation, I think, in a bigger environment, right, in November.
Yeah, our hope is to have our November 10th meeting out in the visiting room.
Great.
That's how the proposal's written, and the Lifers Club membership be there. And continue the conversation and maybe expand on it. And we'll have to have some further conversations
Yes, we
about
will.
that off
Yep.
and not take up this time for
Yeah,
it. But
great.
we look forward to it. The prison
Same.
looks forward to it.
Same.
And I thank the administration for allowing it to happen, because they, without them, it wouldn't have happened,
Yep.
given the lack of staffing and stuff in the
Yeah,
institution. So
great.
we owe some appreciation to them.